Okay, hello. I am going to show you how to continue working with highlights and to blend shadows, all that good stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my project. My computer has it saved here, and once it's opened, there it is. As you can see, I went through and made a lot more changes since the end of last video. A few things that I can note is if you haven't yet, go in and add some texture to the clothing. Go in and add some texture to any other items that might be around. One thing that I did end up doing that was not included in that video was I actually separated out the hair from the face. So I did that because I felt like it might be easier to get layers of shading in there with that in place. So you can kind of see that I was able to darken some of those shadows in places. Another thing you might notice is that I went in and added some shading to the irises. So they're starting to look round and concave even. And I went in and even darkened some of my other shadows that you saw in the video. One thing that you might want to go back in and do is if you feel like your shadows aren't quite lining up, you did see in the video how I moved my photo on top of everything. And then I just continued to draw on these different layers. One thing you can do is you can change the opacity of your photo. So I can bring this down, and that helps me to see, okay, I need to add more, subtract more from here. So I haven't gone in and blended any of the colors yet. That is something that I still need to work on. I haven't gone in and started adding highlights yet. That's something I also have to work on. So let's go ahead and let's talk about adding some highlight or adding, let's blend some areas of the face. So right now, my face is separated into yellow, orange, and red violet, right? And I did this because I wanted to make sure that everything was going to stay nice and neat. I'm going to hide everything except where the face is, right? So I did keep them on the same layer initially, and you could keep them on the same layer. You could also separate them onto a different layer like I did for the hair. And by the way, all I did was select it and move it. I cut it from that layer and pasted it back where it belongs. But what I could do also is I could create a brand new layer on top of the face layer. I usually like to keep the color blocking separate because I can always grab colors from there. So I'm going to move this out of the way. All right. And this is going to be face blending. And I am also going to make the face shadows appear so I can kind of see where my shadows end up. And I'm also going to change the, why is that not showing up? Oh, the opacity is all the way down. I'm going to show this a little bit so I can kind of see where I need to blend things still. So now with that, I'm going to go back to face blending, and I forgot something. I'm going to pick up some colors here. So I know that I'm going to need this orange color, and I'm going to need this red violet color. So what I can do is go to my eyedropper tool, which I always forget where it is. It's underneath the crop tool. It's also the letter I. And I can go over and click the color that I want, and you'll notice that it'll show up here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little, in the bottom left, there's this little arrow, double arrow thing. I'm going to click on that. So I'm going to switch it. And then I'm going to go to my red violet color, click on that, and now I've got it right here and here. Once I bring this up, I won't have issues anymore of trying to remember what color I'm trying to use. So now I need to go over to the left and grab the brush tool, or use the letter B for brush. And I should be working in the base blending section. And what I want to do is I want to make the size bigger and the hardness all the way down. Bring it all the way down. If you wanted to, you could work with a texture at this point. I'm going to make mine a little bigger. And part of the reason I moved my strands of hair to be separate from the face was for this blending process. I thought, it might be easier to blend that separate. So first, I'm going to show you a few things. First off, right now, because this red violet is in the top one, if I draw with it, it's going to be red violet, right? If I click and I reverse, when I draw, it'll be orange. But I don't want it to be, I want it to have a soft edge, and I also want to bring the opacity down. I'm going to bring the opacity down to about 35%, and then I'm going to zoom in. Make sure you're nice and close so that you can really see what you're doing. So at this point, I want to work on softening the edges. If I have my brush is too big, I might need to make it a little smaller. And I'm trying to get rid of that hard line that's there. And if you feel like you're erasing too much of the violet, you can always kind of go back. I'm going to do a little higher. And I'm going to make sure that it's nice and I remove that edge. So I'm going to go down here to work on this a little bit. You want to be careful not to overdo it. Like I did there. I'm going to have to bring some of the violet back. But just want it to be nice and soft right around here. Now, I have to remember, too, that it's going to fill in areas beyond where my cursor is because it's feathered outward. So if I draw too close to the edge here, I'm going to draw onto my shirt, and that would be no good. Remember, Control-Z will undo. And I think I might need to bring some of the violet over here, too. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Work on moving this up. So I'm just trying to get rid of those edges because I don't need them. They're too sharp. It doesn't look very natural. You can use a textured brush if you want and make it look like a painting, like a real painting, not a digital painting. Oh, that's what's going on here. I need to go back a few steps. Now, I am having some difficulties because the face shadows are in the way, and look how much I did on accident there. So I'm going to go back quite a bit. Okay, that's better. So it's starting to look a lot more natural. It's not looking quite as pop art, which is a cool look, but it's not really what we're going for. We want it to look a little more real. Remember, the bracket keys will make it bigger and smaller when you're working. Good idea to learn those keys and to use them religiously. You can see how quick it is for me to adjust the size. I know what I'm doing with my bracket keys here. Now I do need to soften some things up here too. Eventually I'm going to have to go in with a harder, smaller brush to do some detail. But I'm just going through and I am lightening areas that should be lighter. I'm getting rid of edges. So let me bring back the face shadows for a minute and remove the photograph. When I zoom out, you can start to see that there's a little bit more dimension with that color. Now I am going to need to, I think I'm going to need to come back with the violet and come over a little bit, but see how it's almost like this shadow is two-toned? That's really what you want. You want it to look like the shadow has color in it and it's not just, a black area. Now I'm going to be also adding some highlights to this. So before I end this video, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to add highlights. So I want to have my highlights above my shadows. So I'm going to do this, click on the face shadows. I'm going to add a new layer on top. And I am going to want to make sure that I'm using white for this. So I'm going to click on this, go to my color picker, go all the way to white. Now when I'm using my brush, I need to make sure it's got a fairly low opacity setting and that the hardness is all the way down to 0. So it's a really soft brush. Oh, I don't know what that was. Once I have that, I need to make sure this is labeled too. So face highlights. Beautiful. Now I can go through and I can start to add layers on here of highlight. So if I start to add my highlights in, I have 16% right now, and you can already see that it's fairly light still. Might even need to go a little lower. If while you're working, you feel like you need to see it better, you can always just hide it, look at it and go, okay, so maybe I need to even this part out a little bit more. So you can add more. You can even increase this again. You can even too use an eraser. So since we're doing this on its own layer, if we go to the eraser tool, which is under the brush, also the letter E, then I can change the opacity of my eraser tool. Bring that way down. Make sure also that it's a soft brush. And I can even use this to soften some areas. Oh, don't be afraid to go kind of back and forth. You might find that you'll get a more natural look. You kind of jump back and forth between eraser, brush. You change the hardness a bit. Move this up a little bit to here. So I've started adding in highlights. I need to keep going. Back to my brush, which is a B. Make sure I'm on white. Make sure too that I'm at the right opacity. And just keep adding to it. Because everything is on its own layer, you ever make a mistake, you can always go back and fix it. Alrighty? So I'm going to keep working on this. I can even zoom in if I need to. Don't forget your highlights in your eyes. Zoom in. Use my brush tool. Do the highlights in the eyes. If you overpaint an area, don't worry, because you can just undo it. Look at that. It's already starting to look more round. I'll work in here too. How that's starting to look. Some of you were asking me while I was going around the room how I was able to get such fine details. You can zoom in. That's how you do it. Zoom in. If you zoom in, you get lots and lots of fine details. It looks great, in fact. For the highlight, don't forget that you should have a very strong highlight right on the eye there. So zoom out, or when I undo this, you can see. I can even go back into my shadows and start and even darken this area a little bit right around the iris. But it's starting to look more real. In fact, if I zoom out, you can see how much highlights have added to it. It looks so much better. All right, compare these two eyes to each other. Wowza. So don't be afraid to zoom in. Don't be afraid to move things around, make new layers, go back and forth. I haven't really gone back in, but I do need to go in and add a little bit more of this red violet in this zone, a little bit more in some of this on the other side of the face as well, right in here. So I will keep doing that, and I will update these slides as well. Hopefully you learned something from this video, and I look forward to seeing your portraits. Thank you for watching.